Hey everybody. I wanted to come to you today and do a follow-up video on What is an American by Crevecoeur. Okay, I read your summaries and for the most part they were pretty good, but I do want to clear up any misunderstandings or any points that some of you either overlooked or you just kind of, it seemed like you didn't really understand the significance of it. So um, this would be sort of the things that we would talk about if we were face-to-face class on the day when we went through and looked at the text. Okay, so in the first paragraph, it's important for you to note who the I is and who the he is. Okay, so if you watched the video that gave you the introduction about Crevecoeur, then you know that Crevecoeur is the I. Okay, he's writing these letters, this series of letters. This was one of them. You all remember that. So the I is Crevecoeur himself. The he that he refers to is the enlightened Englishman who comes to America for the first time. Okay, so there were a couple of you who in your summaries you mentioned that you thought that Crevecoeur was saying that he was coming to America for the first time, but that's not the case. Crevecoeur lived in America and he loved it. I mean, you know that, but he wanted to be able to experience what it would have been like for an Englishman coming to America, because now you guys know that in the 1700s, all right, the Englishmen looked down on Americans. Everything that was England was considered the top of the social ladder. You know, England and France. I mean, that was it. And America was really just considered a bunch of poor. Poor folks who didn't have any skills, who didn't fit into society. I mean, they really were, Americans were looked down on by everyone else. So Crevecoeur is writing this letter saying, you know what, it's not quite what you think. And if an enlightened Englishman, an educated Englishman, somebody who was looking at the world with an open mind, not filled with the stereotypes and, you know, the social stereotypes that would have been going on, if an enlightened Englishman were to come here, he would really be surprised by the wonderful things that he saw. So that's one of the big things I want to talk to you about in the first paragraph. All right, the second paragraph, he again is talking about that enlightened Englishman. Okay, the Englishman comes here and he is amazed because, or he would be amazed. Okay. Because the Englishman is used to a country where there is a strong social divide. You have your royalty, you have your bishops and your priests, and then you have your poor. Okay, and there was a very small middle class in England, so just the divide between the rich and the poor was great. And Crevecoeur says here that in America there's a level playing field. Okay, yeah, you've got some people who have a little more money than others, but for the most part, everyone is closely related when it comes to socioeconomic status. Okay, and then in paragraph 3, and this was a paragraph some of you, there's a couple things I want to point out to you. This is really the reason for this whole video. This idea of we are a people of cultivators, all right? For the most part, everyone in America farms to some extent. This is a huge difference than what the Englishman would have experienced in England or Europe. I mean, any of the countries in Europe. The wealthy, the king, you know, the dukes, the royalty, they did not farm. They depended upon the labor of the lower class, of the poor. And in America, we don't have that. Everyone farms. And this sentence, we are all animated with the spirit of an industry, which is unfettered and unrestrained because each person works for himself. Everybody farms and everybody works hard. That's what industry means in this context, this willingness to work. And people are willing to work, and they're willing to work hard because they work for themselves. They're not having to turn over everything they do to their land, or all the goods of their work. They're not having to turn that over to their landowner, to their king, okay? And when you can work for yourself, it makes a big difference. Then he goes on in this paragraph, and he's talking about the homes that you might find in America. In this paragraph, he's talking about how they are all fairly equal, which again would be very different than what that Englishman would experience in England or any other countries in Europe. I wanted to point out this sentence. The meanest of our log houses is a dry and comfortable habitation. In this sentence, the meanest, in this context, that means the least. The absolute lowest house that you will find here in America is a dry and comfortable home. And, I mean, you can, from your world history, that's not at all the case for the poor in European countries in the 1700s. Okay? All right, let's move on. Paragraph 4, this is where we start to get this idea of the melting pot. Okay, they are a mixture, they being the Americans. They are a mixture of English, Scotch, Irish, French, Dutch, Germans, and Swedes. From this promiscuous breed, that race now called Americans has arisen. And he's talking here about how, and he goes on and he talks about this in the 4th paragraph and then again in the 5th paragraph, how it is this diversity which strengthens the American character. In Europe, there was a great divide. We've already talked about that. If you were born poor, you're probably going to die poor. And if you were born poor, you're going to marry somebody who was poor. This whole Cinderella story that Disney has painted for us really did not exist in Europe. Okay, the wealthy married the wealthy, and the poor married the poor, and never the two did mix. Unless you were unless you were royalty, you probably were just going to marry somebody of your own race. Okay, your own country. So in America, that's not the case. Okay, people are open to opportunity. All right, in paragraph 5, he talks about how, well, let's look at this question. Can a wretch who wanders about, who works and starves, whose life is a continual scene of sore affliction or pinching penury, can that man call England or any other kingdom his country? That is a beautiful description of the poor in Europe, and Crevecoeur knew it well. Okay? He's saying those other countries, the European countries, they're not treating the poor well. The poor have no hope. But if they come to America, the poor can work and keep the goods of their labor. They can better their situation. In a nutshell, in America, there is hope. In paragraph 6, he continues with this idea of the melting pot. What then is American, this new man? He's either a European or a descendant of a European, hence that strange mixture of blood which you will find in no other country. And I wanted to, this last part. The American ought therefore to love this country much better than that wherein either he or his forefathers were born. Here the rewards of his industry, which again means work, follow with equal steps the progress of his labor. His labor, his work, is founded on the basis of nature and self-interest. What can it want? Can it want a stronger allurement? All right, so we'll stop there for a second. The rewards of his industry, his work ethic, follow with equal steps the progress of his work. His work is founded on the basis of nature and self-interest. Here, you can do what you want to do. If you want to be a carpenter, you can be a carpenter. If you want to be a farmer, be a farmer. If you want to be a doctor, be a doctor. This was not the case in Europe, and the poor were very used to being told what they would do. Okay? Wives and children, starting here again, okay? Wives and children who before in vain demanded him, this American man, demanded him a morsel of bread, now, fat and frolicsome, gladly help their father to clear those fields whence exuberant crops are to arise to feed and to clothe them all, without any part being claimed either by a despotic prince, a rich abbot, or a mighty lord. So in that sentence, he's talking about that the families, men now have pride because they can provide for their families, and their families are happy to help and work because all that they produce is going to go back towards nourishing their families and bettering their situation. The American is a new man who acts upon new principles. He must therefore entertain new ideas and form new opinions. From involuntary idleness, servile dependence, penury, and useless labor, that is a description of the poor in Europe. He, the American, has passed his toils to a very different nature, rewarded by ample subsistence. This is an American. Okay, I wanted to make sure that we went through this because I wanted you to make sure that you have created or generated a good list of characteristics that are evident in Crevecoeur's letter. Some of you did really well, okay, but some of your characteristics were very simple, okay? And in most everyone's list of characteristics, you left out that idea of work, a willingness to work, a desire to work, this ability to work for yourself, okay? Several of you left out that idea of hopefulness, okay? That an American has hope, okay? He can change his situation here in America. Now, I point all this out because your big project, which you're going to have to do at the end of this unit, is define an American by your standards, okay? And I'm going to ask you to go back and pull from your list of Crevecoeur, pull from your list from Emerson that you're going to read this week, and then from the American Romantic Hero that you're going to do this week. And you're going to generate your own list, definition of an American. Okay? Hope this helped out.